They used to sit right over there. Right over there at the end of the pew, on the same side of the church as St. Luke the physician, depicted in this stained glass window right up here. It's interesting. Louise and John, or Jack, as his family and friends used to call him, would often sit together in the same spots week after week, often together with their son Chris, a family sitting together, seeking to come into the nearer presence of the God who loved them all. Dear and grieving family, we are gathered here this morning to do a difficult thing, to say our final goodbyes to people we love dearly. My name is Frank Staples, and I'm the lead minister here at Riverside United Church, where Jack and Louise have been long members. And it is my distinct honor to lead today's service and to be with you all in your time of grief. We open our service this morning in song, singing one of Louise and Jack's favorite hymns, "In the Garden." Please pray with me. Oh God, you brought us to life, and you remind us that death is a natural part of life. We come this morning to celebrate the lives of a couple who were very much in love, whom we have had the privilege and honor to have known and loved, and who have died. We give you thanks for the whole range of human experience they enjoyed individually and as a couple. The wonder, the joys, the challenges. Bless us in these moments of remembering that we may express our loss and comfort one another, even as we pray together the words Jesus taught his disciples long ago, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Everyone loved Louise. So much so that the family found it only fitting that I read for you a collection of verses from the book of Proverbs that are meant to describe her. So that's what I'll do. The passage is loosely titled, The Capable Wife. How hard it is to find a capable wife. She is worth far more than jewels. Her husband puts his confidence in her, and he will never be poor. As long as she lives, she does him good and never harm. She keeps herself busy making wool and linen cloth. She spins her own thread and weaves her own cloth. She is generous to the poor and the needy. She is strong and respected, and not afraid of the future. She speaks with a gentle wisdom. Her children show their appreciation, and her husband praises her. Charm is deceptive, and beauty disappears. But a woman who honors the Lord should be praised. Give her credit for all she does. She deserves the respect of everyone. I would now like to read for you a piece of religious poetry that many of you will surely recognize. A piece of poetry that speaks of faith and of taking what I call the long view of life. The 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Family and friends, the writer of the 23rd Psalm was a person who knew about loss. The loss of someone very near and dear to him. The writer of Psalm 23 knew at the deepest level the feelings that loss can arouse. And it was in response to that loss that he wrote his memorable piece of poetry. And almost 3,000 years later, we are gathered to say our final goodbyes to John and Louise, a wonderful couple near and dear to us. And we do this remembering that the word goodbye actually means God be with you. But remember this, please. God is not only with John and Louise at this very moment, but God is also with each and every one of you. Right now, in this moment. Running through the whole psalm is the sense of God being with the writer. That in spite of the harshness of his suffering, God was with him in his grief and his remembering. As God is with you now. God is with you as you reminisce over John and Louise's life, the variety and the challenge, the work they did, the leisure activities they liked, and most important, their love for you. Close your eyes, and you might see John canning his jellies or heating macaroni on the stove. In the blink of an eye, you might see him setting the table or perhaps washing a few dishes at the kitchen sink. God is with you as you think back on John as the good friend that he was. The good friend that knew both how to listen to you and how to tell you a story. He was a raconteur, wasn't he? A storyteller. As was Louise. They both loved to talk, didn't they? But it was all so much fun. Right? It was. Now close your eyes again, and you might see Louise sitting at her dressing table. Maybe putting on the final touches before a night out. God is with you as you think back on Louise and how glamorous she was. Right? Some would even say captivating and vivacious. I certainly think John would agree. You might remember Louise's beauty and glamour as you come across perhaps her favorite necklace or a brooch. That's all it takes. And you might remember the care that she took to make sure she put it on properly. I invite you to close your eyes again. You might see John and Louise mingling at a party, talking to everyone. Why? Because they were the type of people that valued everyone. God is with you as you might visualize John's feet move gracefully across the dance floor. You remember that? Or his fingers dance gracefully over piano keys. Right? God is with you in that memory. But in a flash, your memory might just as suddenly take you back to the house on Jefferson and right into the living room. From the dance floor to the living room. You might see Louise now sitting in her favorite chair, reading, right? Probably with more than one book in hand, trying to decide maybe which one to read first. God is with you as you remember how smart Louise was, right? How wise she was, and how creative she could be. Jack adored those traits, as Louise revered his. That's how close they were. That's how dedicated they were to one another. Do you not agree? Everything they did, not only for each other, but for all of you as well. All their many experiences of work and of play and of love and of care, they form part of the fabric that made up their lives. But most important to them both, and I would venture to say ultimately to you, are the family and friends they cherished. Each of you is left with wonderful memories of the time you spent with this couple you loved so dearly. And we'll start to share some of those memories shortly. But before we do, let's sing 2 verses of another of John and Louise's favorite hymns, I, the Lord of Sea and Sky. Lauren to come forward and share some of her memories of her grandmother.
First, I'd like to thank you here for coming here today to celebrate my grandparents with us. I'm going to read from you directly from the letter that I sent my Nana on the day before she passed. One of the earliest memories I have of you, my dear Nana, is of a younger you, standing in the cottage kitchen, your hair and the countertops, warm in sunlight, almost glowing, and you're holding a pound of butter in your hand. Come here, Lauren. Take this. Did you know that when I was born, I had a twin sister? She didn't make it, but when we were delivered, we weighed about the same as that. I remember thinking, how could such a big personality, a loud laugh, a lively person like that ever be so small and so helpless? And how could someone so small survive? But Nana, you always were a fighter. It was obvious to me, even when I was young, how much you had lived through and still kept carrying on. I remember learning about your family, for whom it was clear you had loved deeply and ferociously, especially your sisters. You spoke of them with such warmth and such pride. They stayed with you in your stories, the paintings on the wall at the cottage, photos in our family album, and in the names of your own daughter. I learned so much from you in my life, and yet there is still more that I have not mastered. You made the best blueberry pie that I've ever tasted, and try as I might, I don't think I or anyone else in the family is ever going to crack the recipe. But more so, I learned from you about how to love things passionately, to give generously, how to have a zest for life that keeps you growing. I was inspired as I watched you continue to take university classes, even late into your life. You loved your interests so deeply and completely. And you knew how to tell a good story, Nana, how to pull the audience in, how to pause for the laugh and evoke the emotion. Your best stories came from your travels, at least in my opinion. I can hear your voice in my head telling us about the spider monkeys that peed down from the trees on you and Granddad in the jungle, and I remember it sparking my imagination about what me or any of my cousins might go and do one day. You were so clever and good with words, and you nurtured that in us. I can still recall receiving my first Alexander McCall Smith book from you, the #1 ladies' detective agency novel. I laughed aloud at the stories in my room, but I didn't need to feel lonely all that way in Brampton because I knew I had a kindred spirit turning pages every night in Windsor. The heroine of that novel had always reminded me of you. Hearty, caring, practical and stoic at times, clever, strong-willed, and free. You showed all of the ladies in my family how to show up as women, that we could and should have opinions, speak openly, be kind but still direct, be strong and sporty, but that didn't mean that we couldn't insert our own glamour and our own personal flair. Dream big was always the underlying message of the conversations in life that we had and where any of us should be pointing our compass. Little moments of you are going to stay with us forever, like the way that you smiled when you stepped on the steps of your own pool, or on the rocks at the cottage, at home in your own skin and in the water. I can hear that noise still, like the call of a loon that you make when it is just a little bit cooler than you're expecting. You build beautiful communities, set an example of giving back to those around you. I can hear you telling me and my siblings, the more the merrier, reminding us and our family that there are always going to be those with less than us. I saw the smile on your face when you gave back to your church and when you volunteered your time and energy with the museum, lifting others up with you within your community. You lived a remarkable life, didn't you, Nana? And you've left an impression on your community, on your family, and on your friends, but I can only speak personally to what you've left on me. So when I close a book, absolutely smoke someone at a game of euchre or sequence, when I see a beautiful piece of blue glass catching the light, a group of 7 painting, when I hear someone talking about all the delights of Windsor, when I eat a slice of homemade blueberry pie, when I jump into a cold pool or share a piece of corn with my little sister Erica at the cottage and sit on the rocks that you love to lie on, when I ski in Vail and wear the silver heart earrings that you gave me on my 18th birthday that I wear today, when I set my goals to travel late in life, ski till I'm in my 70s, Never stop exploring. When I hold my sister, my brothers, my cousins in a close embrace, I will be holding you close in my heart. I love you so deeply, Nana, and I feel so lucky that I got such a kindred spirit as you as my Nana. I'm so proud of the life that you lived and the example that you have set for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Now I think Kathy has a few words she'd like to say about her dad.
It's very appropriate that we gather here at Riverside United Church to mark this occasion, because this is where my parents spent the majority of Sunday mornings for the last 60 years. Dad's name is on the original membership list dated 1929. This is where they brought us to be christened and where Dad walked his daughters down the aisle on their wedding day. Dad felt it was important to be an active member of whatever he belonged to, and the church was no exception. He and Mom served on almost every committee here, played bells in the bell choir, and on more than one occasion traveled around the province meeting other ministers when it was time to hire a new one. He was important to Riverside United Church, and Riverside United Church was very important to him. Years ago, Dad asked us to play Bridge Over Troubled Waters at his funeral. And thank you, Margita, for playing it so beautifully on the piano just at the beginning of the service. Since his death, I have listened to that song repeatedly, trying to get the message that he wanted to convey. I have come to realize that he, in fact, was the bridge over troubled waters. When we were down, when tears were in our eyes, he would dry them all. He was on our side when times were tough, and when friends could not be found, he was always there. 10 years ago, when I was going through chemotherapy, Dad called me every day for 4 months straight, just to see how I was doing. He was the listener and the consoler for his family, his friends, and for the thousands of patients that he cared for over 40 years of practicing medicine. He sacrificed his needs to help others. He laid himself down. Dad would get called out in the middle of the night to deliver babies, and we wouldn't see him till supper time the next day. Night went into day for him, but he didn't complain. He would even roll up his shirt sleeves, stick his tie into his shirt so as to keep it clean, and pitch in to help with the dishes at the end of a long day. He said he never liked to see anyone work alone. He'd also tell me that the dishes weren't done until all the pots and pans were dried and put away. I still hear his voice reminding me of that when I'm tempted to leave the dishes drip dry. He believed in doing a job right the first time. My dad was the supporter of the underdog. He had a heart for the losing team, the company that was struggling, and the person who was less fortunate. He didn't boast about himself, but he humbled himself. And when he retired, he volunteered at the food bank and the downtown mission. As a teenager, I worked in Dad's office in the summers, and I saw firsthand how he treated people that he came in contact with. He greeted everyone from the custodian to the chief of staff with the same respect. I remember that Dad was asked to be a pallbearer at the funeral of the orderly who cleaned up the delivery room. That left a big impression on me. It was common knowledge that at our house, every time we went out, Dad would see a patient of his. The comments were always the same. "We love your dad, he's the best doctor." Then many would start in telling about their medical problems, and Dad would smile politely and end the conversation, because being a child of an obstetrician, you do learn some things earlier than other kids. When we were little, Mom said she would hear us tell our friends, We're going to go on a family drive if my dad doesn't have a lady in labor. I don't know that I even knew what that meant, but it was a common phrase at our house. Dad's work had to supersede family plans on many occasions, but in Dad's heart, family came first. His wife, his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. He loved and supported all of us throughout our lives. Mom and Dad were married for 69 years, and throughout all those years, Dad always said that he had a wonderful wife and that she was so kind to him. He greatly appreciated and loved her. They had a full life together, filled with many friends, parties, interesting trips, and Dad was able to recount so many funny stories and entertain us with anecdotes about the events that occurred. Dad did what he could to help ease Mom's workload. He would take Holly and me with him when he would make rounds at the hospital on the weekends. We would be left on the front steps of Metropolitan Hospital while Dad went in to see the patients. Holly and I thought we would impress visitors to the hospital by talking loudly in our very own made-up foreign language. I'm sure people must have thought the doctor's kids were a little bit odd. He would tell the story of taking young preschoolers, Chris and Peter, to do a house call. He left the boys in the car with the car keys when he went in to see the patient. When he came out, the keys had been dropped down in the window opening. This was long before the age of cell phones, so he and the boys had to walk a few miles home. All the while, the boys kept asking, "But Daddy, why are we walking home?" Dad's stories of being a young doctor in Northern Ontario were like a history lesson in the evolution of medicine. He regretted not being able to serve in the war, but he had his own MASH unit in the bushes of Northern Ontario. A lifelong Beta Theta Pi member, Dad held his fraternity brothers close to his heart. He attended reunions until he and another gentleman were the only two left. In his folder at home titled Funeral, he had this scripture noted to be very important from his Beta days. I'd like to close with it now. It's from Philippians 4, verses 8 and 9. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if there is anything excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Thank you, Dad, for your love, your wisdom, and your constancy in our lives. Until we meet again, may you rest in peace.
Thank you, Kathy. And now Marilyn is chomping at the bit to get to the lectern. Hey, she has some memories of Louise and Jack to tell us.
Yes, I have to follow those two. Good morning. My name is Marilyn, or as most of you know me as Mary Kate, the youngest of the five children. Today I will make sure to speak slowly and distinctly. Mom always said that to us before we had to get up and do any public speaking. Slow down, speak distinctly. So I have the honor of talking about my parents, Jack and Louise, and their life together, 69 years of marriage. It's amazing. My parents first met when my dad went to work for my grandfather in North Bay as part of his medical residency. A few years later, they met up again in Toronto when Mom was doing her nursing training at Toronto General Hospital and my dad was at the University of Toronto. As the story goes, their first date was to the musical Daffodil. Mom wanted to see the show so badly, and that when my dad asked her to go, she said yes, kind of forgetting that she was engaged to somebody else. The wedding invitations were actually printed. So someone on that evening congratulated them on their engagement because Mom was wearing a an engagement ring, and Mom had to fess up the truth. That night, my dad said something to the effect that you will be getting married, but it will be to me. My parents were married on June 14th, 1952. My dad was 28 and my mom was 22. After finishing his specialty in obstetrics and gynecology in St. John's, New Brunswick, Mom and Dad made their home in Windsor. My mom would often say, "You get out of life what you put into it," and I really believe she lived by those words. My parents traveled all over the world, North America, South America. They went to Africa, they were in the Middle East, they went to Russia, they went to China, India, and Mom could retell stories from all of those trips. They enjoyed live theater, from Windsor Light Opera to Stratford to the Shaw Festival, Broadway, and they attended shows regularly. I remember as a kid getting to go to the theater in Detroit and seeing The Wiz with Michael Jackson, and that was amazing. My parents were lifelong learners. They audited courses at the University of Windsor in poetry, art, and literature. They loved to birdwatch at Point Pelee and were competitive bridge players. Well, my mother was the competitive bridge player. They love to garden, and they have a beautiful garden. And whenever any of us would go visit, we would walk through the garden, and my dad would point out the plants and the shrubs and the things that were blooming. And they had the most beautiful rhododendrons and azaleas in their garden that I have never been able to match. My parents were active in the community. They volunteered their time on various committees here at the church, the art gallery, and the downtown mission. It is said that friendships offer companionship, bring you joy, and help you grow. My parents had such friendships. The Nut Hut gang, the Windsor gang, the Beta brothers, their ski friends and French River friends, university roommates, and neighbors. I was always amazed at the number of Christmas cards they would send and receive each year. My parents liked to have a good time, and they would host epic parties. If there was music at the party or the event, Jack and Louise, and for sure Jack, would be on the dance floor. The jitterbug was his favorite dance, always staying to the end and never leaving early. In 2017, my sisters, Kathy and Holly, took my mom away on a girls' weekend. We took her to Point Pelee for the annual bird migration. My mom was a bit worried leaving my dad for 2 nights, as they hadn't spent a lot of time apart in the last number of years. And as a surprise, on the second night, my brothers brought my dad to the restaurant for dinner. My mom had no idea, and she was thrilled. The two of them held hands at the table all evening. It was so sweet. I think they married their best friend. My dad had a great sense of humor and loved a good joke. Every April 1st, my dad would yell, "Hey kids, there's a bunny in the backyard," and 5 kids would go running to look out the window, and he would yell, "April Fools." My dad and I shared a running joke. And when I say this, it sounds really mean, but it was funny. If he became senile, I was going to be the one to take him to the retirement home under the guise of an innocent car ride. So every time I got a new car or it was a nice day, I would say, "Dad, let's go for a ride. Remember to bring your toothbrush, though. I might be dropping you off somewhere." And he would answer, "Oh, I'm not going anywhere with you." I was visiting my mom the weekend before she passed, and I was helping her get ready for bed, washing her face and brushing her teeth. And I went to get her toothbrush, and there were 2 toothbrushes in the holder, and I said, "Mom, which is yours, and why are there 2 of them?" And she said, "Well, one of yours is your dad's. If he comes back, he'll know where he is." We're going to miss Jack and Louise, Nana and Granddad. It'll be so weird pulling out of the driveway on Jefferson Boulevard and not seeing them waving on the front porch as we leave. Before my mom died, she said to my nieces, Caitlin and Andrea, "Don't be sad. Go live your life. I'm heading on my greatest adventure." And I'm sure that adventure includes my dad. Robert Louis Stevenson, a favorite poet of my mom, wrote, "The man is a success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much." I would like to think that describes my parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. They're fine memories, aren't they? And that's what we're left with. Wonderful memories of Louise and John that can fill a heart. And it's in recalling these memories that we gain the sense that we ought to thank God for John and Louise's lives and for all that they meant to us. We also gain the sense that we have a great God, a strong God, on whom we can lean while we grieve, now that John and Louise are gone. I know they both will be missed by their children, Chris, Peter, Catherine, Holly, and Mary Kate, and by their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It's been hard for all of you, I'm sure, to take in all that is swirling through your minds now that they have passed. But you can rejoice now in the fact that they have both found the eternal peace faith tells me they deserve. And faith tells me more, that they are now enjoying that peace together. Think about that. The writer of Psalm 23 was working out the feelings of grief as he wrote. As he wrote what would become his timeless poem. And he was able to see as he did that the God in whom he had faith was there for him in the valley of the shadow of death. Time would not be the end for the psalmist. For in God's strength, he would overcome the ravages and the end of mortal time. And faith tells us that the rising of Jesus was there for John and Louise, as it will be for every one of us. None excluded. For as the Apostle Paul wrote, what can separate us from the love of God? Can principalities or powers? Can heights or depths? Nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. And faith further tells me that two of God's children, John and Louise Fry, now know the glorious truth of that. They have passed from death to life. And they now know the cosmic peace of God. A peace that passes all human understanding. And for that and for their good lives here with us, we can now say with the psalmist, "Into your hand, O Lord, faithful God, we commit Louise and John's spirit. For you have redeemed them both." And it is with thanks for lives well lived and a love deeply shared by them both that we can now commit John and Louise into God's keeping. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. May God bless John and Louise. May God's face shine upon them and be gracious unto them. May God look upon them both with kindness and indeed give them peace. Pray with me. The bodies are gone, but we are left with the names of this man and this woman, which we speak with reverence and affection. John Fry and Louise Fry. And pray that we may remember these names which they were given and by which they are still known. We cannot believe that all that they meant to us is lost now that they are no longer with us. May their love continue to live in our hearts and minds, in our courage and in our conscience. Help us to remember by word and by deed those who are tested by this loss, that they might not be overwhelmed by it and feel isolated from others, but that through Christ they may find new courage and confidence to face life. Amen. Nice timing. The closing hymn of our service is, "We shall go out with hope of resurrection." As our service draws to a close this morning, I urge you all, as the Apostle Paul so aptly put it in his letter to the church in Philippi, fill your minds with those things that are good and that deserve praise. Things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and honorable. Put into practice what you have learned and received from me, both from my words and from my actions. And the God who gives us peace will be with you. Go now in peace, and may the grace and the love of God go with us all. God bless.